I tried to connect a title with what's going on in the text. And my feelings will not be hurt on this next question, but just answer it honestly. How many of you read this passage this week? It just lets me know, a couple? Okay, so most of us didn't. If you did, there's some confusing parts. You kind of go like, what's up with that? Curses a fig tree? What's going on? So I just want to provoke you to do that. The title here is When What Should Be Good Isn't. There's a game that I've seen played for a long time. It started around kind of our youth group circles years and years ago. We have some small groups we call life groups. I understand it's being played there some, but it happens around Christmas time. And what happens is people bring these, like, they call them gag gifts or whatever. They're supposed to be something of no value, but some people cheat and actually do bring things of value. And what you do is you collect them all and you put them under a tree. And it's just totally for fun. It's a game. And so if you get 10 people there, you all draw a number. And Randy, you might have been at the event I'm going to describe here in a moment. We'll see if there's recognition. You draw a number, and then you go and get gifts in that number. So if you're number 1, you go up to a tree and get it, and number 2 is watching you. And number 2 is the option of, if they like your gift, they can actually steal it, or they can go to the tree. So you like drawing a high number, because when you get to be number 10 out of 10, you go like, man, I can do whatever I want here. And so depending on how the rules go, sometimes if you get stolen from, you either have to go to the tree or you might steal from someone else, depending on how long you want the game to go. But the idea is you're watching something, you're looking for something of value. And so there's a time back when, I'm going to say it, when Randy was in junior high school, and Randy had no involvement in the story, I want you to know, but he may have been a witness of it. I only know it because my daughter was in the same class, and this actually did happen to my daughter, Noelle. She was one of the later numbers. And she watched the things that were drawn from the tree, nothing there that grabbed her attention. So, others drew. So she went, didn't steal from anyone else, and she went and pulled out a particular package that she thought would be good. She felt it was firm, kind of squishy though, so it felt good. It was firm. And she began to open it. It was furry. In fact, a young man who's now an older man named Toby Clint, and if you know Toby, and you know what Toby was like in his younger days, Mischief would be his middle name. And Toby had found what we affectionately call as roadkill. And it was a squirrel that was very stiff. And needless to say, no one picked that gift from Noelle later. And she was expecting something good, and it wasn't, clearly. So sometimes there's things in our lives when we're looking for something that we think should be good and isn't. It's funny. Sometimes it's more serious. And so sometimes family is a place we think there should be good things there. And that isn't always the case for all of us. Sometimes it's a tough place. Or we look to leaders. We think of a leader should be trusted in that. And sometimes in city government or in the church, they fail us. They fall. There are places that we're supposed to look for things that are good, and sometimes they aren't. That in many ways is what's going on in this text, if you've read it. Israel as a nation was supposed to be that good place. Here's what they were supposed to do. In the Old Testament, God took a people and made them for himself. They were to be the place that all the other nations would see, God is doing something unique in this people. They're not great, he's great. They were to be, in that sense, the place that would magnify the name of God. And in fact, the temple was the geographic place where they would gather to worship, and that was supposed to be the place where people from all over could come and learn about the Lord God. And that nation had failed to display God in the way that God intended. And that's what we're going to see in this text. So let's read it now, and we're reading it understanding that, and that will help us. Mark chapter 11, verses 12 to 25. I love having, I think we might project this up here. I love having a copy of the Bible in front of me. And I say this a lot of times. If you're taking the one in the chair and read from it, you can write notes in it. It's totally okay. Underline things. Take it home with you. That's fine. This is the last week of Jesus' life. This is actually Monday. You remember last week's message. He had already come into Jerusalem. He'd actually looked around the temple, so he probably saw all the activity we're going to read about. He went back to Bethany, 2 miles outside the city, probably thought about it before he enters back in. Here we are on Monday. On the following day, when they came from Bethany, it's 2 miles away, he was hungry. And seeing in the distance a fig tree in leaf, he went to see if he could find anything on it. When he came to it, he found nothing but leaves, for it was not the season for figs. And he said to it, "May no one ever eat fruit from you again." And his disciples heard it. And they came to Jerusalem, and he entered the temple and began to drive out those who sold and those who bought in the temple. And he overturned the tables of the money changers and the seats of those who sold pigeons. And he would not allow anyone to carry anything through the temple. And he was teaching them and saying to them, "Is it not written, 'My house shall be called a house of prayer for all the nations'? But you have made it a den of robbers." And the chief priests and the scribes heard it, and they were seeking a way to destroy him, for they feared him, because all the crowd was astonished at his teaching. And when evening came, they went out of the city. And as they passed by in the morning, they saw the fig tree withered away to its roots. And Peter remembered and said to him, "Rabbi, look, the fig tree that you cursed, it is withered." And Jesus answered them, "Have faith in God. Truly I say to you, whoever says to this mountain, 'Be taken up and thrown into the sea,' and does not doubt in his heart, but believes that what he says will come to pass, it will be done for him. Therefore I tell you, whatever you ask in prayer, believe that you have received it, and it will be yours. And whenever you stand praying, forgive if you have anything against anyone, so that your Father also, who is in heaven, may forgive your trespasses." I'm going to pause and pray for just a moment. God, help us to understand you in this and understand us. That's why we're here. Show us you. Show us us and what we need. And help us then to respond in a very good way. Amen. Okay, we're going to walk through this. But here's what I think is helpful. I'm going to give you the kind of the storyline of this. These are all actual events, but I'm going to go through the big picture, and then we'll talk about kind of the details. So here it is. The fig tree was symbolic for the nation of Israel in the Old Testament prophets. The Old Testament often speak of it, Israel like that. So when they come across this fig tree, it looks promising, but it isn't. So Jesus speaks this word, some call it a curse, but he speaks this word, the disciples overhear it. Tree dies. The temple looks promising. It's the place to meet with God. It's supposed to be a house of prayer for the nations, but it wasn't. It had become like a giant flea market. It was a place of commerce. It was not a meeting place with God. Next day, they see that they see the tree is withered, which is a picture of Israel. Israel withered. No fruit. And then Jesus, when they ask him, the 12 disciples do, he teaches some lessons from this fig tree that talk about faith, to talk about praying and aiming towards God's will, and talk about the necessity of forgiving others, which may be the odd one for us. So let's just walk through it and see how that all connects. Scene 1. A promising fig tree isn't. So we see in verse 12 that Jesus is hungry. That should actually encourage us. He was fully God, but he was human like us, experienced all kinds of things like us. He sees a fig tree, he's hungry, the fig tree has leaves on it, he looks for figs, and then Mark tells us that it's not the season for figs. So we go like, man, that's not fair. Okay, I'm looking around here, don't know everybody that well, but I don't see any fig farmers here. Anybody? I don't think, so here's how this goes with fig trees. Middle Eastern climate, there was actually 2 crops of figs. So in the springtime, as soon as the leaves come out, there would be the early spring figs that were the smaller figs. They would tend to come out in March. They wouldn't really fully ripen until May or June. They were really a result of the prior year's sprouts. There was also the later figs, which were the bigger ones, late summer. They would ripen in early fall. Some people call them the good ones. But there was an early crop, and when Mark says it's not the season for figs, he's talking about the really nice crop. There were early figs, and so when the leaves come out, there could be and should be often on trees figs, and that's the type of, that's when this is. It's Passover, it's spring. So Jesus sees the leaves, he's hungry, he finds no figs on it. He says in verse 14, "May no one ever eat from you again." Now that ought to be surprising to us. Why should that be surprising? Well, Jesus is doing miracles all the time, okay? The Gospels don't tell us all the miracles that he did. Mark records just 18 different miracles. This is the last one. When you think about the miracles of Jesus, what are they usually like? They're pretty cool. They're helping people. It's usually demonstrating his compassion. In fact, the one we saw last week, the day right before, was this one blind beggar that Jesus stops for. He has compassion on him. Continually, that's what happens. When he interacts with people, he's doing things for them. They have a need, they ask, he heals them, he raises the dead. When he interacts with nature, creation, he still acts in compassion largely. I mean, we see this, they're on the Sea of Galilee, there's a storm. His disciples are scared, so he calms the storm. Bunch of people, 5,000 people show up. They come to hear him. They're hungry, they don't have food. He does a miracle with bread and fish, with compassion on them. But now he's cursing a fig tree. What's going on with that? It's the last one that he actually does. So we ought to kind of go like, well, this is weird. And whenever you get to a weird place in the Bible, just hang there for a while, okay? You may not figure it out. It's okay. It means something. And here's what is with this one. Jesus is speaking a bit prophetically, and so the fig tree image, if you know the Old Testament prophets, that's what's happened at different times in terms of the picture of Israel as a vineyard or as a fig. But there's a few of the prophets that actually acted out parables. Isaiah, Jeremiah, Hosea. I mean, God had them do some actions that was acting it out. I mean, the weird one to us, it was Hosea. God actually told him because Israel had been unfaithful as a nation, he was actually, as a prophet, told to go and marry a prostitute to demonstrate the unfaithfulness. So some crazy things that prophets do in acting out, not just speaking a word, but acting a word. And that's what Jesus is doing here. He's not just speaking, but he's acting that way in terms of this fig tree representing a nation. You go to a fig tree expecting to find figs. Well done, that was good. Apple trees, apple, okay. Fig tree, you go looking for figs. And they weren't there. Israel is a nation that had been set apart for God. It was supposed to be a nation that would display God, and so when you go to the nation, you're supposed to see God, but that's not what you're seeing in this nation at all. Scene 2. A place of prayer isn't. So Jesus now enters the temple. Isaac, do we get that? I think Isaac's got a diagram if this will work. Excellent, well done. So this is just don't give this laser pointer to children. Don't look at it. See if it works. There we go. Boy, you know, I'm so unmechanical. Can't even find the red button. Okay, there. That's the temple. It's square. It's about 1,000 feet. Those walls are, so non-math people, that's like 3 football fields going from one end to the other. You see the court of Gentiles is a pretty large space there. That's the place where these events were taking place. So let's leave it up for a little bit. I'll just kind of talk through what was taking place there. This is the highest point in the city, the temple is, so you can see it from a long ways away. Remember Jerusalem, that mountain road. This is where they were to come to worship God. And so the temple was that geographic center of that. There's 3 problems that were going on as we read the text. One of them, when you read it, it looks like a flea market, doesn't it? Talk about all the buying and selling that's going on. So just imagine, if any of you have ever been to Taste of Chicago, okay? It's jammed with people in that space. And what was happening was there were Jews who were making pilgrimage to Jerusalem at this time of year to worship. It's the Passover. And so they would bring animals to sacrifice as part of their worship. Well, you know, if you're traveling a long ways, you just want to travel as light as you can. So some of the people, it's like, man, it's a drag to have to bring our animals with to, you know. So someone had this great idea. We'll start selling them there as a convenience. They could have sold them outside the temple. But why should we get money outside the temple? We get money inside the temple. So what happened is like vendors had contracted like booth space. The high priest is getting rich off this. And it's like they're paying booth space. And so they got animals in there. Get how it sounds like it's okay because they're just being pragmatic and providing animal sacrifices? So, I mean, used to be you just bring your own animals. Now I can go buy them. But what it had done, it had made that place, it was a place of prayer, into a giant flea market. You couldn't pray there. Can you imagine the stench? Can you imagine the noise? The density of people? we also read there was money changers there. So what's taking place is, one, within the temple, you needed to use the currency of the temple. There was a temple tax, a half shekel. There was also, if you imagine these guys coming from all around the Roman Empire and all around the Mideast that were coming to worship, they had their local currency. So just like if you're traveling out of country, you know, go to Canada, not Canada, that's not a good example. Some places do accept our dollars. You go someplace where you have to exchange that with a money changer, always for a fee, mind you. That's what's going on there. And then when you read in verse 16, I missed this one until I just kept reading it closely. Verse 16 says, and he would not allow anyone to carry anything through the temple. Some people, you see a gate at the top, gates at the bottom, where the temple was, they were actually using the temple like a shortcut, you know, through the city, like the giant hallway. Imagine the bedlam that's going on inside that space, and it's supposed to be a place of prayer. This was all happening in the court of the Gentiles, the only place that they could go. A place that was set aside for prayer. It had become an absolute madhouse. Money changers, a mere thoroughfare for some place. It was hardly a place of meeting with God. And when Jesus walks in, when we read this, we should understand that he went ballistic. He's overturning money tables. He's driving out the people who are selling pigeons. He's stopping people who are trying to just walk through with their stuff. It was like, if Israel was like a fig tree, there was no fruit on this fig tree. Now, we don't know how long it took him to clear the temple. You know, Mark is kind of this, it's an action-packed book, but we read this in verse 17. And he was teaching them and saying to them, is it not written, let me pause. Is it not written, when he says that, what's he saying? He's quoting the scriptures to them. He's quoting the Old Testament. He's actually quoting, it's Isaiah 56 here. Is it not written, my house shall be called a house of prayer for whom? For all the nations. For all the nations, but you have made it a den of robbers. This is not mild-mannered Jesus. This is not kind and merciful Savior. Oh, he is. And we saw it the day before. He is. He's going to die for our sin. He is that. But this is the anger of a holy God against blatant disregard of his teaching, of his commands, and of his very will. And it would be good for us just to pause. This may not be the Jesus we're used to seeing, but it would be good for us to pause and take note of that. Verse 18, we read, the people are astonished at his teaching. They're actually getting it and understanding it. And the chief priests and scribes, they want to kill him. Scene 3. This is the lessons from the tree and the temple. We should hear this tree and temple, what goes on there, as some kind of judgment in both of them. The next day, Peter's coming along and he says, hey, that fig tree you cursed, look, I mean, it's already dead. What's up with that? So I'm going to read this again because there's some really interesting things as he now begins to teach them in verse 22 through 25. And we're going to walk through this slowly, okay? Have faith in God. Truly I say to you, whoever says to this mountain, be taken up and thrown into the sea, and does not doubt in his heart, but believes that what he says will come to pass, it will be done for him. Therefore I tell you that whatever you ask in prayer, believe that you have received it, and it will be yours. And whenever you stand praying, forgive, if you have anything against anyone, so that your Father also, who is in heaven, may forgive your trespasses. I want to connect these dots. He says, have faith in God. He then talks about praying, believing. Then he talks about the necessity of forgiveness. So that might be, how do all those things connect? So here's the verses that people generally hone in on here. It's verses 23 and 24. Okay, where he's talking about, if you just believe, you can say this mountain, get up and move. And they kind of reduce all this kind of to the power of positive thinking. If you simply believe enough, anything can happen. I want to say to you that's partly true, or it's kind of true, but it can be very misleading. So what we must do is look at what? Look at the context. Because you can take anything that I've said and take it out of its context and you make it sound as if it's saying something different. than it actually is. The context is the surrounding verses, and I think verse 22 and verse 25 help us immensely. Here's what we're going to do right now. This is a small exercise. Oh, you know what? We're doing a workshop on how to read the Bible. Some of you guys are coming to that. But I say this is a small exercise in that. How to read the Bible, make sense out of it. You can't take it out of context. And here's what some people do. Anybody I love Oriental food? Anybody? Get a witness there? Anybody else? Okay. I love it. I love the food. They just give you a fortune cookie at the end. That's fine. But some people, they dig the fortune cookie. I want to read it. Open that thing up. You ever got a friend that steals your fortune cookie? Thank you. I knew somebody did. Okay. And some people, they read that thing, Well, some people treat the Bible that way. They take a verse like you just take it out of its context like it's a little fortune cookie. Oh, cool. That's it. It's my little fortune, my little promise, there's promises in the Bible all the time. But we must understand them in their context. There's things that are said before and after that totally affect the meaning of that, and we will understand it wrongly. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to walk through this. Is almost like an exercise in how to do that. So, he says first, verse 22, have faith in God. It's great. I did this down in Sawyer. I got one person that's very interactive. Whenever I ask a question that's rhetorical, not necessarily meant to respond to, she always responds. I love it. So this morning I said, have faith in yourself. I said, yes! That's exactly what our culture says. It's exactly what isn't it? That's not what he says. Have faith in God. I hate the Scripture. I love the Scripture. I hate the Scripture. It tells us things against our culture. This is God's Word. Have faith in God, not in yourself. Not have faith in faith. It's not, if I just believe enough. We talked about this last week, okay? It's not that. It's not have faith in the amount I can believe. It's have faith in God. Who are we believing in? What is He like? What does He want? It is God who can move that mountain, not the strength of my faith. It's God. Have faith in God. Start there. Now, I'm moving on, but that's a whole sermon in itself. Okay? Verses 23 and 24, I'll come back to this. But this is just really the strength of the way in which we can believe in God. We can pray expectantly. It's a powerful metaphor. God moves mountains. I'm looking around this room. I know a lot of you that's happened in your life. God moved a mountain. It's a powerful metaphor. It's how we're supposed to pray. But I'm just doing the context at 22. I'm going to come to 25 now. Very curious thing. Whenever you stand praying, that was their posture. We tend to sit. They would always stand when they pray. So whenever you stand praying, what's the next word? It's a verb. Whenever you stand praying, forgive. Whoa, that's weird. Why does he say that? Whenever you stand praying, trust God. Whenever you stand praying, think what God thinks. Whenever you stand praying, forgive. Isn't that odd? I don't get that. We'll pause there. Let you wrestle with that a little bit. But I would suggest to you that's the qualifier. You said you can pray about anything. You can ask anything. You ask this mountain, you believe, it's going to move. But when you stand praying, forgive. That's the qualifier. Does he do that anyplace else? The Bible does that a lot. It talks about praying with confidence in God, trusting in God, but there's a part of way that comes through. I'm going to show you a couple. This is how we understand difficult scriptures. We don't take it out like a fortune cookie. One thing. Understand context. What does other scriptures say? So I'm going to pick two. This is a fun exercise. You liking this? Nope, I'm not either. Okay. I really do. Okay, 1 John 5, 14 to 15. Write down the reference. You can look there later. But I just want you to notice it's the same confidence in praying. And this is the confidence that we have towards Him, that if we ask anything, next words, according to His will, He hears us. And if we know that He hears us in whatever we ask, we know that we have the request that we've asked of Him. He wants us to pray confidently, expectantly, in faith. We're praying according to His will. Well, I don't know what that means. It's okay. We'll come back to it. John 15, 7, Jesus says something very similar. He says, if you abide in me and my words abide in you, ask whatever you wish and it will be done for you. Qualifier, If you abide in me, and my words abide in you. If you do that, what happens? If you abide in Jesus and his words are abiding in you, you know what happens? You will want what he wants. That's what will happen. And you will ask for the very things that he desires to do. That's very cool, actually, when you think about it. So we can pray with confidence. We understand that these verses are not making God our magic genie. Like, we trapped God. Ha! I believe enough. Now you got to do it. You said it. That's not it. Okay, let me come at it a different direction. Have you ever asked God for something that, like, you later on realized that was dumb? You're going like, whoa, I'm glad you said no to that one. Glad you knew better. Anybody? All right, we're not going to tell stories about that one. But I had a friend once who was a teenager once, and one time he thought there was a particular girl that it would be really important for that girl to like him, and he prayed that God would have that happen. I don't know anybody else who would have prayed such a prayer in their teenage years. And later on realized, oh man, Lord, I'm so glad you didn't answer that one. That would have been disastrous. Lord, there are things we ask for all the time that later on we realized that wasn't actually the best for me. And God knew what was best for me. So I'm suggesting to you there's a way in which you need to pray. There are some qualifiers, but he wants us to pray confidently. Here's the qualifier in Mark, what he says. It's almost odd. Verse 25, I'm going to read it again. And whenever you stand praying, forgive. If you have anything against anyone, so that your Father who is also in heaven may forgive your trespasses. I'd love to preach a whole series on forgiveness. It's just a profound theme. But here's it simply. Forgiveness is God's agenda in our very hearts. It is the root of the gospel. Forgiveness is God's will. It's in the gospel. I'm going to give you some places to read yourself later. Read my favorite parable of last year's. I might have said this recently, is Matthew 18. It's that last story he tells. That parable has affected my life profoundly on the forgiveness issue. Read Matthew 5, 6, and 7, which we call the Sermon on the Mount. Just look, you could do this devotionally this week. Just look through, where does it speak about forgiveness and what does it say? Every single chapter he talks about it. It's really, really important to God. Listen, simply put, when we realize how much we've offended God, and there isn't one of us here that fully realizes it. There isn't. I don't. When I realize that, and how much God's actually forgiven me, there's only one option, as I become a forgiving person. Other people do affect me. They do sin against me. I sin against, my wife's one of the most forgiving persons because she's married to the biggest jerk I know. I do dumb things to people that I love. Do you? I act selfish. I don't like it. But when you really understand God's forgiveness of you, it will make you a forgiving person. It will not happen because you've looked at the other person because they've changed. It won't. Forgiveness has to happen in our hearts. There's a series of sermons in that I love. I can't believe he mentions it here. Forgiveness is clearly God's agenda. All right. I'm going to back out, try to give a practical summary because we're just talking about prayer. I'm going to try to land this plane. This is my best understanding of this. I want to demonstrate the strength of verses 23 and 24 because I really haven't done that yet. But the right of mind of strength to Jesus' words. And here it is. I think I've got this so you can project it. That when we pray in harmony with God's will, impossible things will happen. And we can ask anything. In fact, we are supposed to ask freely and expectantly because God loves to do the impossible. He does. Why? It shows the greatness of his worth. And he is greater than any of us realize. I mean that, truly greater than any of us realize. And he actually does care what you're going through. He actually does. We say God can do anything, but when you see God do something that's impossible, then you know that God can do anything, right? You know it. And many of you, I know, have seen it. You've seen things rescued in your life that should not have happened. You've seen God turn you around when you did the stupidest things you ever thought, and you don't know why you did them. It's like a crazed person, and God rescued you from it. And so when you see that and you know that, we're supposed to remember it and call it out, because now I say it with conviction. God does the impossible. That's who he is. And he's going to keep doing it. I don't know when and where, but I can pray expectantly with that. I can. That's a sermon in itself. But I'm going to go to a different question next. Hey, how do I pray if I don't know it's God's will? Because probably there's a lot of things, most of us are asking for things I don't know. Like, God's will on this thing. So how do you pray if you're uncertain if something is God's will? Well, one is, we want to keep thinking hard about that. But I'm going to use a very recent example, a very practical example. I just want you to follow me when I walk through this. How many of you know that we love meeting in this space right here? Yeah. How many of you know that we can't do that forever? Oh. How many know that we have a temporary contract with the school? You know that? So if you know anybody in the school, like big stuff, like important stuff, thank them. Is this not a great place to meet? You thank them, okay? Can't be here forever. Got to move sometime. Don't know how it's going to happen. Don't know when it's going to happen. But some of you have been involved. We've been praying about, okay, Lord, what would be the site for Converge Community Church? Where would that be? If this is temporary, what's next? What are you going to do? So I've been praying about it. So let's just say that you've been thinking about that for a long time, been praying about that for months. Let's just say you saw a particular place. You go like, whoa, that place would be great. It's like, there's another place like that. And you're praying about it, you know, maybe for months. And, well, can I ask God for that? Can I? Sure. Sure you can. Do I know that's God's will? Nope, I don't. But I can ask for it. I can ask for it confidently, but follow me, but I'm submitted. I'm asking, but I'm really asking. I'm praying confidently, but I'm submitted. What is God's will in this case? I don't actually know about the building. You might have something better. I saw one that I think is really good. Might have something better. Might be this one. I don't know. Here's what I do know. I know what Jesus said. What did Jesus say about the church? He said, I will build my church. That's what he's going to do. So, church kind of needs some place to meet, usually. I mean, at least in Michigan in the winter. No fun meeting outside. I like Lakeview. Actually, we couldn't even meet in the park that long. It's good. So we need some place to meet. And Jesus cares about that. He said he's going to build his church. So I'm okay. So I'm praying for a place. All right. But what is priority number one? Number one priority. Yeah, it's a trick question. Sort of. What's the number one priority? What's most important? That we get a building? Nope. It's that God gets glory and praise in whatever takes place. Whatever happens. That's why he does impossible things. That's actually number one. So I'm praying that God gets maximum glory. And if that building disappears and someone else bought it or something else happens, do I say like, God, you reneged on your promise? Do I say? No. He's faithful. I can pray expectantly. Just asking. I'm thinking about God's will. I'm trying to pray expectantly according to God's will. I want him to get maximum glory. God may miraculously provide that building or another one, but he's going to do it in a way that brings him glory. Is that not the theme of the Bible again and again and again? Remember Gideon shows up with this big army. He's got a big army, but the other guy's got an army that's 10 times bigger, and God says, hey, your army is too big. He keeps downsizing it. So he's got 300 guys. Why? Because God wants to get glory. That's what he wants to do. We want to pray that way. God will be faithful. He cannot be other than that. He cannot. I'm going to close with this quote. I think we have it up here, and then I want to think through some applications. This is John Piper. This is probably one of the preachers in our day currently that causes me to think strongly about God. So I love it. Here's what he says. Praying in faith does not mean that we will always mean being sure that the very thing we ask will happen, but it does always mean that because of Jesus, we trust God to hear us and to help us in a way that seems best to him. It may mean that he gives us just what we ask, or that he gives us something better. Sometimes God's answers will overwhelm us with their excess. Other times they will taste more like medicine than food, and they will test our faith that this medicine is really what we need. But he'll always be faithful. Always be faithful. All right, you can take that one off. I'm going to close thinking this way. Hey, worship team, why don't I ask you guys to come up now? Okay? But I'm going to talk for a couple minutes, so you can stand for a bit. I just want to think through a couple. We got two big thoughts in this text, and I want to think through them. And then I want So it's always good. We hear the preach, we want to think through how do we respond to this kind of a thing. And so here it is. Think through now this lessons from the fig tree in the temple. There is this aspect where Jesus is doing some strong things, and there's kind of like a whoa, a pause, like whoa. So this is not the compassion of Jesus, but there's a judgment factor in there. So I'm going to acknowledge what's true. There is a day for thinking about this personally. There is a day for all of us that we will reckon before God, and we want to be right with him. And that's just a fact. And so if you don't know how to do that or whatever, I'd love to talk to you about it. Check something like that on your Connect card later. I just want to interact about that, because that's actually true. In addition to that, there's a very corporate indictment against the nation. And that's why the fig tree is cursed. That's why the temple is cleared out like that. He's talking about this nation is not being what it should be. You should be the place where God is known. And there's a temple. So what follows after Jesus raises from the dead, God is manifested in his people, and the people, or the church, people, are called what? The temple. That is, when we gather, God shows up, he meets here. And God's people are meant to display him. So the same indictment could be of us collectively. He's saying people, not only individually is there that kind of a thing, but as God's people, we want to reflect him. I just want to confess that, man, sometimes I get stuck on my agenda, my thing I want to do. I don't want to do that. I want to love him with everything I have. I want to love you like myself. And that only happens as the gospel changes your life. So there's that part. Think about individually. Think about collectively. And that we would desire his glory. And then I want to just think about what he said about prayer, believing, trusting in him, and forgiveness. And I don't know, a lot of us have stuff in our lives. It's hard to forgive people on the way. If you want to talk about that more, put that in your Connect card. Love to do that. It's just a serious, I think only the gospel changes that. Only it does. But here's the other part. God, when you have a genuine relationship with him, you're going to end up wanting what he wants. That's why we want to read his word. That's why we're encouraging Bible reading. We want to spend time with him there. And when that is a genuine relationship, we can pray expectantly, we can pray confidently, and we can pray towards God. And he does impossible things. So I'm done. And what we're going to do now, I'm just going to invite you to pray. Let someone play. Cindy's going to play, and I just want you to pray. Here's what I want you to do. Just ask God, Lord, how should I respond to what I heard today? And I'm going to give you maybe a minute just to think and to pray that. But I want this to be your space, and then I'll close here, okay? So let's pray. If you're not used to this, you're just talking to God, and you don't have to use any fancy words. Just talk to him. You get questions, just talk to him. So let's pray. God, thanks that you speak to us. Some of us haven't heard you for a long time, or some of us may not even be used to that. Thank you that you've actually left your word in the scriptures for us, that we can know you. God, thank you that it comes alive to us. As we talked about a couple of weeks ago, it's God-breathed. It's life to us. Thanks that for many of us that's becoming more true all the time. And I pray this for my friends gathered here. Help us to hear you, help us to see you, and help us to follow you, whatever that is, God. Thank you for this place. Thanks for showing up here. Thanks for being God. Amen.